now. Okay, I might, if I'm sharing now, can you see that? Yeah.
Yes, it's up.
Okay, this is my journey with Cesair started about, I think it must be over 10 years ago. I had finished a series of paintings on the Children of Lear and sat down with Sandy and Ellen, and we were trying to think of what's next. And the story that appealed to me the most was possibly this woman who 5,000 years ago was told by her grandfather that she wasn't uh, well enough behaved or a good enough girl to get on the ark. So her extraordinary response uh, was to say, well, F you, Noah, I'm going to build my own ark and gather my female friends, and we're going to go on an even bigger and better journey. And I just thought her response, I mean, the immediacy of the myth struck me in that you have a rejection and you can do one of two things. You can cry because I didn't get on the football team, or I wasn't invited to the Debs dance, or I didn't get invited to the party, or you can do something about it. And her response was so extraordinary. Not only did she build an ark, she built three of them bigger and better than Noah's, and she headed off an extraordinary journey with 50 Amazonian warriors and only three men. And we can get into as we talk, maybe we can figure out some of the reasons why it's only three men. And I tend to paint, I'll have some examples for you later on in this presentation, but I do tend to paint from poetry. Um, and the first written word that Sandy and Ellen gave me was of the conquest of Cesair, which is here on the screen from the Lower Gwala, MacAllister, MacNeil. 40 days of strenuous journey was Ireland found before the flood. Cesair found it, fair of colour, with the people of her bright-skinned ship. Now I'm going to read the whole poem at all, or just the first stanza there, but poem itself, this poem was a source of inspiration. And the first kind of series of slides are when an artist, Tony O'Malley talks about picking up a feather on the ground and that would get him going. For me, it's often the written word. And then what I do is I go into my computer and I just search for images, remind me of the poem. And if I just go through a couple of those sort of conceptually. This is a Louis Le Brocq painting, and it's called The First Communion. And as you can see, it's a procession of young girls in their white veils arriving for their communion or departing afterwards. But it's quite an extraordinary motion of arrival. And that was an image that came to mind that could be a source of inspiration for the Cesair. I started to see them as their ship arriving off the coast of Kerry somewhere, and them spilling out of the boat, bringing their gifts. That spilling out would be carried on the waves to Ireland in a similar fashion that a scanner slab was carried as platelets from the equator maybe 5,000 years ago. And the power of the waves, I saw them as objects with this power force of the waves coming behind them. And again, just if you can remember those images, you'll try to see how I captured them or didn't capture them in the painting. This again was an image that struck me of a wrecked boat having journeyed from Mesopotamia somewhere. Gifts and the people are spilling out onto the land of Ireland. So these images keep racking up in my brain as the start of painting. I was in the Tyrone Guthrie Centre and I met a young dancer, Laura Sarah Dowdall was her name, and she ran a program called Blind Dance. And I watched her and some of her cohorts in the studio. They would put braille dots on the floor, and people like me had to go blindfolded and barefoot. And we'd have to, they would say, walk 3 meters forward, find the dot with your foot, pirouette. and you learn to dance blind. And they kind of inspired me really because I was working on the start of the Cesair painting in the Tyrone Guthrie Centre when I met them. And they told me about how wonderful it would if the Cesair painting could be in a dark room and people could feel it as opposed to, it would be a blind painting, go with blind dance. And Laura has given me a series of pictures. There is another stage to the Cesair painting. I mean, it's something I may never finish. Um, where having, again, I might talk about that later on. This image, figures in the Cesair painting are touchable, feelable, and they are a 3D bas relief, which added to the time, the amount of time it takes to actually produce the painting. This is a memorial to the children victims of the war, Lidas Republic. Something into our own famine statutes. Just quite haunting images in mono color of some very sad children. Now, I wanted our warriors to be warriors and not sad, but I was really taken by the haunting images and thought, oh my goodness, if I could get something, even akin to this, this one in particular. Was just, again, inspiring. So while you're working through your thoughts, reading the poem, and gathering all these images, I often describe artists, certainly my art is like Columbo, where I research, and hope that I can capture some of it later on. I was trying to explain this in the Tyrone Guthrie Centre. I was feeling very insecure, me, a little unknown artist, and there's all the good and the great of the arts world all around me. And I was trying to explain why I was there because I won a prize to get there to start the Cesair painting. And a beautiful lady called Mary Dorsey stood up and said, I know what, because they had asked me, well, what am I there for? And I was trying to explain this woman 5,000 years ago and her warriors, and they came to Ireland and they brought their gifts and they were ordinary women, but they were warriors and they had dealt with adversity. And Mary Dorsey Istana stood up and said, I have a poem for you. And she read The Ordinary Woman. And just again, the first stanza. And again, I ask you, and again, you ask me why. Why don't I write a poem about the ordinary woman? Not the extreme individual case, but the normal woman, the average woman, the everyday woman. And then she goes on really to kind of, I suppose, spoiler alert, to kind of give a series of occupations and things that women do, and not one of them is ordinary. In other words, there's no such thing as the ordinary woman. There are only extraordinary women. And she captures that whole spirit or soul of what I was trying to paint. In the painting, later on in the second half of this presentation, you will get an idea from me of how these amazing women have taken on adversity and triumphed, and how it's just, there wasn't a day that I'm working on this painting that goes by that I don't think about the Ordinary Woman poem by Mary Dorsey. Now, taken 10 years to still have an unfinished painting. This is just a little kind of, I suppose, a little bit of a Paul Joyce art commercial for the next 4 or 5 slides, and a bit of a flag of Sandy Dunlop. I'd be working away on my Cesair painting, and Sandy would arrive in my studio and say, why can't we do a male Dune painting? So, a couple of months goes on a male Dune painting. And then Peter Cochrane from Egsha and Carrier would arrive and say, can we do a poetry painting? Because we do these poetry books every year, and I'm just a girl who can't say no, so I do another painting. And this is the New Grain series that Sandy wanted. And then there was another holiday painting by Damien Malloy, which was for the poetry book 2. Then there was the mythology of dance. This is a huge painting. It's about 15 foot wide by 8 foot high, and it captures the world of dance and music. Then there was the When I Dream, which is another painting for a poetry book. And then Sandy suggested we do the goddesses. So I spent a month on Clare Island doing five goddesses. I like to joke about this painting. I show me really in some of them only to give you an idea of the scale. So they are time consuming. I mean, this is 7 foot high by 15 feet wide. Captures constellations of Irish goddesses. And I'm very proud to say that this was for St. Bridget's Day. Bridget is the triple goddess here on the left. It was projected by her story all over the ancient buildings of Ireland, and I received a princely sum of €150 for that, where I lost my amateur status as a painting. So I'm proud of that moment. Moving on, this is the final one this year. Americans amongst you might know of a lady called Josephine Baker. This is Josephine Baker finds herself just a surreal story, and it's set in a kind of a Dali landscape. I'm really proud of this one. I kind of love that one. It was done in Kilreelig. And again, you'll hear about Kilreelig later on. Now, so back to Cesair. So the first iteration, the next few series of paintings are about the iterations of Cesair. So I tried to do it as a braille painting. In other words, it's texture. You can touch it and feel the ladies, feel the faces, feel the heart, feel the gifts they bring. It was all white modeling paste. And it was quite, I was kind of pleased with it to a point. But I couldn't get it couldn't photograph well, and it needs to if you're going to promote it. You can't actually see it on the less the lighting was really good. I knew I had to do something more with it. Now the textures were good, like it's an arm. The dress was done in kind of bought these old mop heads and mixed them into plaster and then slapped them on, and it looked like a lovely kind of sheep's wool dress. And the clothes were important. You couldn't see it really. It was lost. There was an awful lot of work, not actually merging for anyone to view it, but you could actually get the sense of it from touching it, which was. I decided then, iteration 2, which takes up a lot of time, I decided I'd paint it and put in portraits and make the girls very realistic. And you'll probably see later on from some of them, they're very beautiful young women. But the problem with this was, the more I looked at it, and it didn't pass the coffee test. And the coffee test is when I'm working on something and I go back into the kitchen from my studio, have a cup of coffee, and I think, this is the greatest thing I've ever done, and I'm Rembrandt. But by the time I've had the cup of coffee and I get back to the painting, I think it's the greatest piece of shit I've ever seen. So if it doesn't pass the coffee test, it's painted over. This actually is a slide of something that happened completely by accident in Kilreelig. There's a roof light in the studio, and I just noticed early, it was probably about 11 o'clock in the day, that, oh my God, this is Mount Rushmore. And this is quite exciting. But the light coming in on the 3D figures began to bring them life. And it was quite a stunning moment that, how was I going to capture that? Because obviously I can't have a roof light every time. The figures became much more prominent with the right lighting. So how am I going to do this? They're quite prominent there, very touchy-feely. How do I keep this on a permanent basis? So I began to experiment with sort of monochromatic shadings and shadows, and actually not painting the painting in a negative way, whereby I'm actually not working on the figures, but I'm working on the backgrounds and the bases around them to try and make them stick out. And it began to really become, I began to think that it was getting close back to the haunting figures I was looking for. This is another example of what the background. If the painting's white and it's a dark background, like stone walls, wow, they really stand out. But I don't want them to be white, so then maybe the background has to be white. This is probably one of the breakthrough moments where, if you think back on the waves and the figures, I said, wow, if I could capture that. I never did get the waves as good again. On the first kind of sample of using foam and wattle panels and cutting the figures out, I actually was getting somewhere close to what I was looking for. It gave me the confidence to carry on because, like, it's a lot of the time you think it's stillborn, you're not happy, it doesn't pass the coffee test, but this began to pass the coffee test. The waves reminded me of the cottage and the waves, this arrival of the waves, and the face of the little girl and the colors, the monochromatic uh, figures. And then as they became a fight, they were lost. When you kind of build them up um, and distress them, bring in the shadows. I was getting really close to that little girl. And with the waves in the background, actually began to feel I was getting somewhere. And that's when you can start to carry on with it. Now, these figures are pretty much life size. This is where I was starting to build up on the studio wall. Yeah, I used the frames for paintings and backwards so that you could see the cross, symbol of the cross, which kind of I use it a lot in a painting. Also, it was a great structure for holding things in place, like sails and figures could be fixed to it. And then the wattle dog, the willows with the background and waves pouring through it. And you can see the construction, like it's basically cut out from a plywood, and then I apply ropes and uh, lines, mop heads, anything really that I can do to make the texture work. And then what we ended up like, this is the painting about 2 months ago. The men hadn't been finished. They're over here on the right-hand side. I had got in women. I had made it into the when 50 women arrived. They divided into three tribes, two of 17 and one of 16, and they took a man each. And I figured I'd be the weakest of the three men, and we'll have a laugh about that later when I tell you who the two other characters are. But I would only get 16 in my tribe. So there are 16 women. I've tried to actually tell you who they are. And again, we'll go through their individual stories. But for the other 34, I have used kind of masks, ancient masks like our ancestors, flowing over on the waves. Not finished. There's another 12 to go on it, and there's another three women to go. So it's kind of like Green Thailand says, the painting you're never going to finish, Paul. You're still working on that, and she's right. I think I'll just keep working on it. Again, that gives you. I don't know if you can see, gives you an idea of the scale. So they're virtually life-size figures, a little bit small because again, the only reason I made them tiny little scale down is that I only had, like, that's my studio. I've got 16 feet by 8 feet high to work in there. So I had to scale them down a little to get the numbers in. The women are, the first four are coming off the boat. Here's the skeleton of the boat. There's a musician, three men, myself, and the ladies. How they managed to get a dolman on the boat, I'll never know, but that's artistic license. There's me with the girls. Some wonderful photography by a local photographer here in Dublin, Michael Quinn, MP Photos, and I work with him all the time on my paintings because he's so easy to work with and he's just so talented and he makes them look, for shows like this, even better than the actual painting. Some great detail. You can see there's a lot of rope used, masks, and the lovely colors that with the foams. Each one of those ladies has a very kind of relevant story to the which we'll hear in the second half, uh, and that's coming up later. So, Sandy, that's the painting and the progress and the iteration, um, and I've divided it into the Eggsha show and the Cesaurs for the second kind of part of it. So this is Sandy alluded to it. We had a night in our local community. In fact, it's a night that's shared all over Ireland. It's called an Eggsha or cultural night, where in villages and towns and cities, everybody tries to do a cultural event. And Sandy and Ellen very kindly invited me to the Bard Literary Night and to tell the Cesair story. And here I am. This is just hard to believe, but the people are queuing up to get in here, and I'm stapling faces to the painting because I haven't got it finished, which is, I believe, that's the way things are in the theatre. So this is before people arrived. We're putting up the curtain to hide the painting so we can have a very dramatic arrival of Cesair in the townland of Terranure, which means land of the yew tree. And there's me giving instructions and panicky stage,
Bono, how are you?
yeah, pretty panicky at this point. Very amusingly, my wife arrived with a bag of clothes, and I had a quick shower in the changing rooms. It's a sports club that we were in. Then we started, and Ellen, a wonderful introduction, as she always does, to the night, and she very kindly talked about very first mythology. This is the very first, about 13 years ago. Worked with Sandy on, and it was quite really. I've a lot to thank the Bard for, because I wouldn't have a painting if it wasn't for them. I'm an architect by trade, and I went to Sandy. I'd heard he was pretty good at sorting out, giving you sort of little mental exercises and things to kind of make progress in your life. And I mean, literally, I have to say, I had everything. I had the wife, the kids, the job, the house, the car, but there was something kind of hollowness. Again, I go back to Tony O'Malley, this interdict, this soul hollowness, that really the only time I don't feel that pain is if I'm creating in the process of painting. It's when you lose that pain the most. And Sandy asked me, gave me a book by Moira Heaney, is that the right name, Moira Heaney? And asked me, would I find something in that? Would I be interested in painting a mythological story? And one, because we had a lake when I was in school, and there were always swans on it, and we were always kind of afraid of the swans, but there was always a mythology or a fear around the swans that really resonated with the children of Lear. So, and Ellen talked about that. And so that was the introduction to the night, which was followed by actually another school friend who shared a classroom with me, Shay McGlynn, beautiful fiddler, violinist, and he played us some haunting music. And all the time we were trying to build an atmosphere. Tessa painting was behind the Sandy there, behind him, behind the curtains with starlights. And Sandy gave us the story of Cesair, whole journey really. And it was in one slide that really kind of resonated with me was that he talks about the Odyssey, and it's like they're just walking down the road, and then Cesair's journey is about like 100 times the length of the Odyssey, and those. It just, I think the phrase he uses is, Cesair's journey makes the Odyssey look like a walk in the park. So I rather enjoyed that one. And then we had this great telling of the Cesair story from the perspective of the female from Cesair, like Karina Tynan. Absolutely amazing reading. And then we had this dramatic build-up. Ellen was saying really nice things about me, which I couldn't handle very well. And he's still going on at me. But I think there was a warning somewhere not to delay everybody for the night. But it was a lovely little kiss, Andy. I hope you weren't too jealous. And then we revealed the painting. Now, you've all seen it in a raw state, but being absolutely kind of determined that my art would be at the intersection of mythology, storytelling, and theatre. I see the paintings as a backdrop to a theatrical production. And a good friend of mine from the guitar group we're in, Jody Trehy, arranged for his lighting guides. He runs a business whereby he does lighting and sound for school theatrical productions. So he arranged for his lighting guy to be there for me on the night, and we had also got the screens and the speakers. So what you're seeing here is, I just gave them free rein, and I couldn't if I got cans of paint and sloshed it like a Pollock or something, I couldn't have done a more beautiful job. The lighting was just every time I looked at it, I couldn't believe the gold or the blues, the yellows, and it was just intriguing to see how they changed the colors and the sound system. We all felt really like we were astronauts with our headsets, or it was just all just now looked so. It's just something to be kind of. I was surprised by it. Um, Also, we had two kind of screens either side. So as that's just back to what the original looks like and how the illusion of the lights and the effects of the lights can even more enhance it. This is just a particular, this particular slide is where I'd only, after 13 years or 10 years, I'd only 16 separate faces and I'm supposed to have 50, and I'm wondering how am I ever going to solve this problem. And I came across this again, trolling through sculptural faces on the internet, and it struck me, oh my God, 50, 16 of them could be the tribe, but 34 of them could be just masks evoking the thought of ancestors. And just thought I'd show that one in there just to remind myself that while I only talk about 16, there will be 34 of these. To go on to the Cesairs now. And this is the first one on the left. If we go back a little, I think a couple of slides back. On the very left here where the arrow is, a lady called Linda Buckley. Now, I only met Linda Buckley once in a restaurant in our village in Perrier. And I had just been chosen to go to the Tyrone Guthrie Centre. I'd won a prize. I came second actually in the Elaine Early Award. And the reason they gave me the award was they were very interested in me doing this painting, this Cesair painting, because I had written it up with Sandy's help. And I'd applied for the residency, and I won a month in the Tyrone Guthrie Centre and 3 months in the cottages with a studio. A lot of the painting was done there. But Linda Buckley, I met her in a restaurant in Terranure, and she had just been to the Tyrone Guthrie Centre, and she told me all about it. I knew nothing about the importance of these residencies or how you could learn, but she was very encouraging. Her skill as a Cesair, she brings. This is the face. It's not bad. Not a bad likeness, and she is quite famous for this high-tech music. She's been a professor in Trinity, a professor in Edinburgh University, and she was involved in the Nothing Compares movie. Sinead O'Connor, if you Wikipedia or look her up on Google, she's just extraordinary modern music, and she brings the gift. So her, if you like, her gift is to bring us extraordinary music. And that makes her exceptional. Next girl, Carmilla, was actually in the Tyrone Guthrie Centre. I met her one time. She won a artist prize to get there. She's of Russian origin, born in France and lived in London. She writes ghost stories for children, which were actually quite brilliant, and she won a prize. So I met her when she was there. A lovely lady. She had to give up all her adversity. She had to give up all her writing because her husband went off with another lady and left her with three boys. This is the He's one of the earlier Cesars as well. Um, and she put them through. She cleaned houses, sold her flat in London, bought a house in the country to trade down, and got her three guys through college. And what a success story there. She sent me this is a recent photograph of the three of them when I said, Cara, can you send me on a picture of your family and all you've done? And I've told her about the story and how I tell her story in the painting. And she overcame adversity, got her boys through college, and now God is back writing as an artist again. I think it's just wonderful. Um, Their own Karina Tynan. I often heard Sandy describe Karina again. This is quite a nice version of her. Um, the ropes and the twines and the modeling paste is it's difficult to try and get realistic images. And then again, I was like to say to the Cesars, been traveling for 5,000 years, so they're probably not looking at their best. It's an old joke. I use it every time. It's the best. I promise them they're the best I can do right now. But Sandy often talks about Karina Tynan, and I certainly met her about 13 years ago on the Bard in Clare Island, and she was very shy and quiet. And now, wow, how has she overcome that? She's written two books already, and the girl's going to be global. Her stories, her telling of a story is just out of this world. She is there's no ceiling, I think, for her skills as a storyteller. So she's Cesar. Claire McGlynn. First met Claire when she was about 20 years of age. It was about 2010. We had set up a thing in our local community, a networking business system called NearNet. And Claire wandered in. He was an Irish international weightlifting athlete and had suffered a serious injury. I just go back to this, like quite a champion at our weight level, and suffered a serious injury, and she had to give up. She had to give up her career, her international career, and she said what she was going to do. And she had a little showroom, almost like Sandy's office, or my studio at the back of her garden. And her parents let her set up a gym. And she now has like Alex, she has a CrossFit gym. Her response was, well, if I can't be an athlete myself, I will train people to be athletes. And I had helped her with, she had to get planning permissions and stuff like that and fire officers. And I helped her a little bit when I used to be an architect. I was glad to help her. Later on, unfortunately, I ended up having a triple bypass. And she went off and unbeknown to me, did a course. Sorry, I just jumped ahead there. She did a course in rehabilitation of people who've had heart surgery and called up to me one day and says, right, get yourself down to my gym. I'm going to get you back on your feet. And I spent 3 or 4 months daily hobbling down the Terranure Road in a lot of pain to do a little bit of exercise, and gradually got back. Amazing young lady. If we have 3 sons, and we've always said if we could have adopted a girl, it would have been Claire. She's a beautiful woman. She's Cesar. I mean, she overcome what adversity, and now thriving gym and great business, and wow, still a great friend. Osa, or Ose, he spells it, Osa spells it up, Osa. Again, about 10 years ago, met Osa in a workshop. I went to a workshop in um, uh, Ballinclan Art run by an fantastic American artist called Rebecca Crowell. And in those days, you were able to give out your uh, emails and things. So I was browsing on Facebook when this beautiful woman clicked up and explained she was coming from Sweden to Dublin, and she was going to the Ballinclan workshop, and could I give her a lift? And it's a funny story. By coincidence, and my wife was sitting opposite me, and I said, "Oh, this lady wants me to drive her to Glen. What should I do?" And she said, "Oh, she went to walk around um, the table to look to view the picture." And in that time, Osa had said, "Here's a picture of my grandmother. I live with her." And there was this little old Swedish lady with a bun. And she was, I'd say, in her 70s, my age now. And she had a spinning wheel. And my wife says, "Oh, you must spend the week with that old lady. Bring her, be really kind, bring her all around Ireland and be nice to her, bring her to Clare Island." And then it was only much later on that she actually realised that it was 34-year-old, not a 70-year-old granny that I was travelling around Ireland with. But you might delete that whole story, Sandy, from that. We edited it out. But we had great fun. Also, the tragedy in Elsa's life was she had returned from Sweden. She had actually been, she wrote quite a series of poems about it. She's a wonderful poet. She had been raped, and her trip to Ireland was the recovery from a rape. And when I talked to her about Ellen, I was never able to put her together with Ellen. The timing just didn't work out. We only had a week. Osa went back, and because she was the writer, set up a writing program in Sweden for women who had been abused. And I think that's just an incredible story. So her response to her trauma was to do something to create somewhere where people could, ladies in particular, could recover from abuse through writing, which was her skill set. And I think it's still Write Yourself program. It's still on the net and still running. Now owns a artist residency in Umeå, Sweden, with her partner Michelle. And wow, what a response and what a story! And she's a wonderful poet. This is one of her books, The Bone House. The whole book is just one poem. Quite wonderful. So moving on, I don't know if any of you are aware of the lady called Noelle Campbell Shaw. Basically, she left Wexford when she was about 16, had been adopted, came to Ireland and ended up being multimillionaire before multimillionaires were even thought of. Owned 10 magazines, I think. Murdoch or somebody bought her out of it, and off she went, Kerry. She set up a, um, a village, a famine village, and restored it for artists to use. For the last 30 years, over 6,000 artists from all over the world have travelled to Kilreelig to work an art residency, stay in the village, um, and produce art free of charge. You pay a very small utility price. He has been absolutely so kind to me. You're not supposed to get there only maybe once every 2 years, but he's regularly invited me back. And she has put, as I said, 6,000 artists. There is a big fundraiser. I don't know if any of you are very wealthy, but if anybody wanted to donate anything to her fundraiser coming up in Patrick Gibaud's in about 2 weeks' time, where she's having she runs a dinner every year, which, as well as the money they get from the Arts Council, is very necessary to keep Kilreilly going. But there are 8 cottages, one of which is given over to community, so people go to gather together. You couldn't but produce work here. It's just so quiet. It's the next step America. It's just stunning, and it overlooks the Skellig. And that's what you wake up to in the mornings. I mean, it's just so soul uplifting, extraordinary place. So that's her legacy. She's a Cesair. And then there's everybody, oh my God, the Queen of Cesairs, the chieftain of the O'Malley's, CEO of the Rape Crisis Centre, I mean, politician, I mean, it's just endless. Council of Europe, there's no end to this woman's skill. And she has been so kind to me again. Introduced me to Jane O'Malley. I spent a day down with Jane, looking at all of Tony's paintings, the studio being inspired. I don't think I'd have a painting if it wasn't for the two O'Malley Dunlop. Sandy doesn't like me calling him an O'Malley Dunlop, but there you go. Mary Dorsey, the famous Mary Dorsey, Ostana poet, s- like um, gay rights, lesbian activist, amazing woman, absolute fire, fiery, full of energy. She's the Duracell bunny. Extraordinary poems. As I said the story early on, she knew what I was trying to get at and read her poem and stayed in contact with me. And she'd made me a promise at that residency 10 years ago that if I ever finished the painting or if I was ever unveiling it, she'd read the book. She'd read the poem for us. And I rang her. I hadn't talked to her in about 5 years. And I rang her, said, Mary, and she said, you have it finished. When are we on? If I'm in town, I'll do it for you. She never forgot. And she came up to the Action Carnier and she gave us the most, like, it was the climax of the show, really. It was the most amazing story, and people got the connection between the painting and the ordinary woman. She's a lovely lady. My wife loves her particularly because Izzy is a sea swimmer. And a few years ago, I think about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, Mary and her friends all paraded down to the 40 foot, which was one of the last bastions of male chauvinist swimming in the Irish Sea, and it was a men only beautiful pool off rocks in Dunleary, and men only. But the ladies paraded in naked and took over, and the men ran, and a little bit like the Cesair story. So, Anya Mary, very fond of her, and my attempts at a Mary Dorsey. She has more than books, but one I've constantly referred to, the air, so through all the windows wide. The recent brief Kathleen Watkins chose for her anthology, Ordinary Woman, as one of her poems. Very talented lady, very feisty, love her to bits. Mary Hawkes Green was actually one of the first women that gave me a little bit of energy about my painting. We were on Sandy had invited myself and my son Kevin to a climate conference in Dublin. And for some reason, Mary Dorsey was looking for a photograph of a swan, and we didn't actually have a photograph of a swan. We could have easily Googled one, but I gave her kind of an abstract painting of a swan. I said, is that in use to you? And she said, absolutely. And then said to me, listen, I run an art school down in the Burren in Clare, and would you like to come down? And I said, I'd love to. So that was actually the first kind of realization of an art residency and what it was about. They gave me a studio for a week, and I stayed in a local cottage and had the most amazing time. Met a lot of young artists, mostly American professors, but it was kind of an energy charge that maybe I can do this thing. It was a lovely recognition, a validation, I think.
Paul,
Um,
Paul, what? Maybe we should have 12 minutes just to chat about these Cessas. Would that be all right?
can I just finish them and then go quickly? I'll leave you out, you the men out. Um, So this, I'll go quickly, really fly through them. This is Mary Hawkes Green. Her husband died. They had set up this art college in Clare, and he died, but she has carried it on her own, which is quite, her Cesar story. This one's important, very important. Fiona Toomey, her daughter Millie told her she was going her own life. And Fiona did everything she possibly could to prevent that happening, but when she was 13, Millie managed to escape from them and do that. Fiona's reaction to it was to set up Hug and Hug Charity. They now have Hugs for Men, and it's insights from suicide survivors and bereaved. If you and when we did the actual show, I have since heard of two people who have gone to Hug. So uh, if that's all I ever get out of that night. That was Millie. A similar Mary Sinclair Courtney, another friend of mine, works very hard on social media to promote her son. Also took his own life, and her response is to She says there isn't a day go by somebody doesn't contact her on social media. Helen Fowler, American lady, well, actually, she's from Tullamore, lives in North Carolina now. Uh, her Cesair story is serious tragedy in her life, but she got over it by helping children in Nicaragua, and herself and her husband Richard, they bring water and provisions to villages there, and are under a lot of threat from regimes. Finally, of the Cesars in the tribe is Yana. Yana is staying with Anne and Sandy. Yana's most amazing, obviously coming from the Ukraine, not an easy story. That's adversity enough. And Yana is the most amazing artist. I quickly go through, that's my mum, came from very poor background, insisted on education. My sister voted the one angel in the family is of mercy in the family is enough, we've always said. And my darling wife, Isabel, who is a teacher, and this is a picture recently of, she trained these guys. She was their first coach when they were 4 years of age in Turner Rugby Club. And they won an under-20s cup, and they all came over to her and asked her for a selfie with the cup. Wow. That's Cesair. Sadie is Finton. I'm, I think. And then we had Bill, who's a wonderful artist, who source of inspiration, the Cesair paintings. I'll quickly go through just give you some atmosphere of the night with the lighting. And we had two big screens, and it was a theatre production. And Mary Dorsey reading her poem.